My sister convinced our father to change his will, cutting me out completely after I spent 5 years caring for him through his illness. She waited until I was at his funeral to tell me I'd inherited nothing while she got everything. What she didn't know was that I had discovered her scheme weeks earlier, and her greed was about to cost her more than she could ever imagine. I am Victoria Hayes, a 34-year-old physical therapist in Denver, Colorado. For the past 5 years, I had devoted my life to caring for our father after his stroke left him partially paralyzed. While my sister Amanda lived her glamorous life in Manhattan as a fashion buyer, I had put my career on hold, moved back into our childhood home, and became Dad's primary caregiver. I had sacrificed relationships, promotions, and my own dreams, because family meant everything to me. At least I thought it did. Dad had always promised that the house, a beautiful Victorian in the heart of Denver's historic district, worth nearly $2 million, would be mine. "You're the one who stayed, Vicky," he'd say during our quiet evenings together. "You're the one who chose family over everything else. This house should go to someone who understands what family really means." Amanda knew this. We'd discussed it during her rare visits home, and she'd always rolled her eyes and said she didn't want the old money pit anyway. She had her penthouse in Soho and her designer lifestyle. What would she want with our childhood home? Everything changed 3 months before Dad died. Amanda started visiting more frequently, bringing expensive gifts and staying for longer weekends. At first, I was grateful. The burden of care had been overwhelming, and having her help, even sporadically, felt like a blessing. She would take Dad to his appointments, giving me precious hours to catch up on my own life. She cooked his favorite meals and sat with him during his afternoon naps. For the first time in years, we felt like sisters again. But something was different about Amanda during those visits. She was more interested in Dad's paperwork than usual, asking questions about his finances and his will. When I walked into his study one afternoon, I found her going through his desk drawers. "Just looking for his insurance cards," she said quickly, but her cheeks were flushed with guilt. I should have trusted my instincts then, but I wanted so desperately to believe that Amanda had finally come home, that she finally cared about family the way I did. The truth revealed itself 2 weeks before Dad's death. I had taken him to an emergency doctor's appointment. His condition was deteriorating rapidly, and forgotten my phone at home. When we returned, I heard Amanda on a call in the kitchen, her voice low and urgent. "The new will is filed, right? He signed everything last week when Victoria was at work. Good. She has no idea what's coming." My blood turned to ice. I stood in the hallway listening as my sister, the person I had trusted most in the world besides our father, detailed how she had convinced Dad during one of his confused episodes that I was planning to sell the house and put him in a nursing home. She had told him that I was stealing from his accounts, that I was only caring for him to secure my inheritance. She had twisted every act of love I had performed into evidence of greed and manipulation. "He was so confused anyway," Amanda was saying. "The stroke affected his judgment. I just helped him see the truth about Victoria's motivations. Someone had to protect him from her." The casual cruelty in her voice shattered something inside. Me, this wasn't a moment of weakness or a desperate decision. This was calculated betrayal, planned and executed, while I held Dad's hand through sleepless nights and celebrated every small victory in his recovery. I spent the next 2 weeks watching my father die while knowing that the daughter who had abandoned him was about to inherit everything, while the daughter who had sacrificed everything would be left with nothing. The worst part was that Dad, in his diminished state, seemed to believe Amanda's lies. He grew suspicious of me, questioning my motives, asking why I never visited anymore when I was literally there every day. Amanda had poisoned the last precious weeks of our relationship. When Dad passed away on a Tuesday morning in November, I held his hand as he took his final breath. Amanda arrived from the airport an hour later, perfectly dressed in black, carrying a designer handbag that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She cried beautifully at the funeral, playing the role of the devoted daughter who had loved their father so much. Friends and family members approached her with sympathy, telling her how lucky Dad had been to have such a caring daughter. No, one mentioned the daughter who had actually been there. After the burial, as people gathered at our house, my house, as I still thought of it then, Amanda pulled me aside into Dad's study. "Victoria, we need to talk about the estate." Her voice was gentle, almost apologetic, but I could see the satisfaction glinting in her eyes. She handed me a manila folder. "Dad changed his will a few months ago. I think you should read this privately." Inside the folder was a legal document that took away everything I had ever counted on. The house, Dad's savings, his life insurance policy, everything went to Amanda. There was a small paragraph about me receiving his personal effects, as if 5 years of my life were worth a box of old photographs and his reading glasses. But the worst part was the letter Dad had supposedly written to accompany the will, explaining his decision. It was filled with Amanda's lies about my greed and manipulation, written in Dad's handwriting but with Amanda's venom. "I'm sorry, Victoria," Amanda said, but she wasn't sorry at all. "Dad was worried about your financial motivations for caring for him. He wanted his estate to go to someone who loved him for who he was, not what he could provide." The irony was so thick it was suffocating. Amanda, who had visited maybe 15 times in 5 years, was now the loving daughter. I, who had given up everything, was the greedy manipulator. Standing in that study, surrounded by books I had read to Dad during his recovery and medical equipment, I had learned to operate for his care. I felt something inside me break and then reform into something harder. The grief for Dad's death mixed with the rage of betrayal until I could barely breathe. Amanda was watching me carefully, probably expecting me to break down or beg her to reconsider. Instead, I folded the papers carefully and looked her in the eye. "When do you need me to move out?" I asked quietly. "Oh, Vicky, you don't have to rush. Take a few weeks to find a place. I'm not heartless." But she was heartless. She had stolen my home, my inheritance, and my father's trust, and she expected me to be grateful for a few weeks' grace period. That night, after the funeral guests had left and Amanda had returned to her hotel, I sat in Dad's chair in his study and made a decision. I wasn't going to let Amanda destroy everything I had worked for without consequences. If she wanted to play games with family loyalty, I would show her exactly what betrayal felt like. The first step was understanding exactly how she had manipulated Dad. I spent hours going through his papers, his computer, and his phone records. What I discovered was a systematic campaign of psychological manipulation that had started months before I realized what was happening. Amanda had been calling Dad during the hours when I was at work, filling his confused mind with doubts about my motivations. She had hired a lawyer to help convince Dad that I was taking advantage of him, using his diminished capacity to make him believe that the daughter who changed his bedsheets and cooked his meals was actually his enemy. The cruelest part was that Amanda had used Dad's love for me against him. She had convinced him that cutting me out of the will was actually protecting me from becoming consumed by greed. In his confused state, Dad thought he was saving me from myself. The letter he had written was filled with expressions of love twisted into justifications for betrayal. Amanda had weaponized his dementia against both of us, but Amanda had made one crucial mistake in her scheme. In her rush to secure the inheritance, she had overlooked something that would become her downfall. Dad's stroke had affected his cognitive abilities, but it hadn't changed his character. The same man who had raised us to value family above everything else had kept detailed records of our family's history, including some secrets that Amanda had probably forgotten about. Hidden in his desk, behind the drawer where Amanda had been snooping, was a folder Dad had labeled, "For emergencies only." Inside were documents that revealed a different side of our family history, including records of Amanda's first marriage, a marriage she had never told Dad about, a marriage that had ended in scandal when she was caught embezzling from her husband's family business. Dad had helped her cover it up, paying back the money and ensuring that the records were sealed. But he had kept copies of everything, probably as insurance against Amanda ever betraying the family again. The folder also contained evidence of other lies Amanda had told over the years: fake college transcripts, fabricated job references, and documentation of loans from Dad that she had never repaid. Most damaging of all were recorded conversations between Dad and his lawyer, made during his lucid moments, where he expressed doubts about Amanda's sudden interest in his care and his suspicion that she was manipulating him. These recordings were dated just weeks before the will was changed, proving that Dad had been coerced during moments of confusion. As I read through the documents, a plan began forming in my mind. Amanda thought she had won by manipulating a sick, old man. But she had underestimated the paper trail Dad had left behind. More importantly, she had underestimated me. I had spent 5 years learning how to fight insurance companies, navigate legal systems, and advocate for someone who couldn't advocate for himself. Those skills were about to serve a very different purpose. The next morning, I called Amanda at her hotel. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," I told her, keeping my voice neutral. "You're right. Dad was worried about my motivations, and maybe he saw something in me that I didn't want to acknowledge. I think I need some time to reflect on the kind of person I've become." Amanda's relief was audible. "Oh, Vicky, I'm so glad you understand. Dad loved you so much, but he was worried that caring for him had changed you. He wanted you to find your way back to the person you used to be. I think I need to start fresh somewhere else," I continued. "Would it be okay if I had a few months to get my life together? I'll pay rent, of course." This was the hook. Amanda thought she had broken me, and now I was playing into her narrative of the defeated sister who needed time to accept her new reality. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'm planning to renovate the house anyway before I decide what to do with it. Having you there to keep an eye on things would actually be helpful." Amanda's generosity was nauseating, but it served my purpose. I needed time to execute my plan, and she had just given it to me. Over the next several weeks, I began quietly building my case. I copied all of Dad's documents and recordings, storing them in multiple secure locations. I researched elder abuse laws and found that Colorado had strict statutes about taking advantage of someone with diminished capacity. Most importantly, I began documenting Amanda's behavior pattern, reaching out to family friends and relatives who had witnessed her manipulation during Dad's final months. What I discovered was that Amanda's behavior hadn't gone entirely unnoticed. Dad's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, had seen Amanda coming and going during the day when I was at work, and had thought it was strange that she never stayed long enough to actually help with Dad's care. Dad's physical therapist had noted in his records that Dad seemed more confused and agitated after Amanda's visits. His doctor had observed changes in Dad's demeanor that coincided with Amanda's increased presence. Most crucially, I found that Dad's lawyer had his own concerns about the will change. He had documented Dad's confusion during their meetings and had recommended that Dad wait until he was more lucid before making major changes. But Amanda had pressured both Dad and the lawyer to proceed immediately, claiming that Dad's condition was deteriorating rapidly and that this might be his last opportunity to protect his interests. The lawyer, it turned out, was willing to testify that he had serious doubts about Dad's capacity to make such significant decisions during the period when the will was changed. He had only proceeded because Amanda had convinced him that Dad was having a rare lucid period and that delaying might mean Dad would never be able to protect himself from my supposed manipulation. Armed with this information, I consulted with my own attorney, a specialist in elder abuse cases who was fascinated by the complexity of Amanda's scheme. "This is one of the most sophisticated cases of financial elder abuse I've seen," he told me. "Your sister didn't just manipulate your father. She created an entire false narrative and used his medical condition to make him believe it was true. But challenging the will wasn't enough for me. Amanda had stolen more than money. She had stolen Dad's trust and our family's integrity. I wanted her to understand exactly what it felt like to lose everything you counted on, to have the people you trusted most turn against you." The opportunity came when Amanda decided to sell the house. She had moved back to Denver temporarily to oversee the renovations and had begun marketing the property to luxury buyers. She was planning to use the proceeds to expand her business in New York, buying a larger apartment and investing in a boutique. That would make her wealthy in her own right. The house wasn't just my inheritance, it was going to be the foundation of Amanda's entire future. That's when I struck. I filed a formal complaint with Adult Protective Services, alleging that Amanda had financially exploited our father during his illness. I provided them with copies of all Dad's documentation, including the recordings where he expressed suspicion about Amanda's motives. I also filed a civil lawsuit challenging the will on the grounds that Dad lacked the capacity to make such decisions, and that Amanda had used undue influence to manipulate him. The legal processes moved slowly, but their impact was immediate. The house sale was frozen pending the investigation. Amanda's potential buyers backed out when they learned about the legal disputes. Her business plans crumbled as the money she had counted on became tied up in litigation, but I wasn't finished. I also reached out to Amanda's employer in New York and provided them with copies of Dad's documents about her first marriage and the embezzlement scandal. It turned out that Amanda had lied on her job application, claiming she had never been involved in any legal disputes. Her company had strict policies about employee honesty, particularly regarding financial crimes. Within a month, Amanda's perfect life began unraveling. She was fired from her job, her business plans collapsed, and she was facing both criminal investigation for elder abuse and civil litigation that could result in her paying substantial damages. The house she thought she would sell for $2 million became a liability she couldn't afford to maintain. The most satisfying moment came when Amanda called me, crying and desperate. "Victoria, please, we need to talk. This has gotten out of hand." Her voice was broken, stripped of the confidence and superiority she had displayed at Dad's funeral. I met her at a coffee shop near the courthouse where our preliminary hearings were being held. Amanda looked terrible. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the stress and exhaustion that had aged her years in just a few weeks. "I never meant for things to go this far," she said, reaching across the table as if to take my hand. "I was just trying to protect Dad from..." "From what?" I interrupted. "From the daughter who spent 5 years caring for him? From the daughter who gave up her own life to make sure he was never alone or afraid?" I kept my voice quiet, but Amanda flinched as if I had shouted. "You stole everything from me, Amanda. My home, my inheritance, my relationship with Dad. In his final weeks, you made him die thinking I was his enemy." "He was confused," she whispered. "The stroke changed him. He wasn't thinking clearly about anything." "You're right, he wasn't thinking clearly, and you used that against him. You used his illness to manipulate him into betraying the daughter who loved him most." I leaned forward, making sure she could see the steel in my eyes. "But here's what you didn't count on. Dad may have been confused, but he wasn't stupid. He left a trail of evidence that proves exactly what you did." Amanda's face went white as I explained what I had discovered in Dad's files. She hadn't known about the recordings or the documents about her past. She had thought she had covered her tracks perfectly, but Dad's methodical nature had preserved the truth. "What do you want?" she asked finally, and I could see she was calculating how much this was going to cost her. "I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything," I said simply. "I want you to know how it feels when the people you trust most betray you. And I want you to live with the knowledge that you destroyed our family for money that you're never going to see." Over the following months, the legal process played out exactly as my attorney had predicted. The investigation found clear evidence of financial elder abuse, and the will was overturned on the grounds that Dad had lacked capacity and been subjected to undue influence. Amanda was ordered to pay restitution for the emotional distress and financial harm she had caused, and she was permanently barred from inheriting any portion of Dad's estate. The house was restored to me, along with the rest of Dad's assets. But the victory felt hollow. Amanda's betrayal had poisoned my relationship with Dad's memory and destroyed any possibility of us ever being sisters again. The house was still beautiful, but it would always be haunted by the knowledge of what Amanda had done to get it. Amanda moved back to Manhattan, but her life there was ruined. Word had spread through her professional network about the elder abuse case, and she couldn't find work in her field. The friends who had admired her glamorous lifestyle distanced themselves when they learned about her criminal behavior. She had to sell her penthouse to pay legal fees and ended up living in a small studio apartment, working retail jobs to pay rent. 6 months after Dad's death, I received a letter from Amanda. It was written on cheap stationery, and her usually perfect handwriting was shaky. "Victoria," it began. "I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, but I need to try to explain. I never meant to hurt Dad. I was scared that you were going to get everything and I would be left with nothing. I panicked and I made terrible choices. I know I can never undo what I did, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry that I got caught, but sorry that I hurt the 2 people I should have loved most. I know you hate me, and I understand. Why? I destroyed our family, and I deserve everything that happened to me. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what I lost. I read the letter several times, looking for signs of manipulation or self-pity, but it seemed genuinely remorseful. For a moment, I considered responding, maybe even suggesting we try to rebuild some kind of relationship. But then I remembered Dad's final weeks, when Amanda's lies had made him suspicious of my every kindness. I remembered the look in his eyes, when he asked me why I never visited him anymore, even though I was sitting right beside his bed. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive. Instead of responding, I put the letter in Dad's desk drawer, next to the documents that had revealed Amanda's crimes. Let it stay there as a reminder of the cost of betrayal, both for the one who betrays and the one who is betrayed. A year after Dad's death, I finally felt ready to make the house truly mine. I kept Dad's study exactly as it was, but I renovated the rest of the house to reflect my own tastes and needs. I created a home office where I could work on the physical therapy practice I was finally ready to start. I planted a garden in the backyard where Dad and I had talked about putting one, but never found the time. I filled the house with friends and laughter, creating new memories to balance the painful ones. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pursuing justice so aggressively, if I wish I had just let Amanda keep the inheritance and tried to preserve some kind of family relationship. The answer is always no. Amanda's betrayal wasn't a moment of weakness or a desperate mistake. It was a calculated decision to destroy someone she should have loved in order to get what she wanted. She spent months systematically poisoning Dad's mind against me, using his illness as a weapon. That kind of betrayal demands consequences. But I also learned something valuable from the experience. Family isn't determined by blood or shared history. It's determined by love, loyalty, and sacrifice. The family I built around Dad's care, his doctors, therapists, neighbors, and friends who supported us through his illness, proved more trustworthy than the sister who shared my DNA. When Amanda betrayed us, it was these chosen family members who helped me uncover the truth and fight for justice. The physical therapy practice I started has become successful beyond my dreams, specializing in caring for elderly patients and their families. I use my experience with Dad's care and Amanda's betrayal to help other families navigate the challenges of aging and illness. I've learned to recognize the signs of financial elder abuse and have helped several families protect their vulnerable relatives from exploitation. In a strange way, Amanda's betrayal made me stronger and more purposeful. I learned that I could survive losing everything I thought mattered and build something even better from the ruins. I learned that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoring balance and protecting others from similar harm. The house is peaceful now, filled with the sounds of friends and clients and the quiet satisfaction of work I love. Dad's presence is everywhere. In the books on his shelves, the garden we planned together, the memories of quiet evenings when family meant everything to both of us. Amanda is conspicuously absent from this life, not because I've actively excluded her, but because she chose to exclude herself when she decided that money was more important than love. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Amanda had simply told me she was worried about her financial future after Dad's death. We could have worked something out. Dad would have wanted to take care of both his daughters, and I would have shared the inheritance if Amanda had asked honestly. Instead, she chose deception and manipulation, destroying not just our relationship but any possibility of the family Dad had wanted us to be. The greatest tragedy isn't that Amanda lost the inheritance or faced legal consequences for her actions. The greatest tragedy is that she threw away the one thing that money can't buy, the love and trust of the family she should have cherished. In her quest to secure her financial future, she destroyed her emotional future and left herself truly alone in the world. In the end, I realized that loyalty cannot be forced and trust can never be blind. Amanda's betrayal shattered me, but it also rebuilt me stronger. I may never get back the relationship I thought I had with my sister, but I've learned to trust my own instincts above anyone else's. I've learned that real family is built through actions, not words, and that love without loyalty is meaningless. The house that Amanda tried to steal has become a symbol of everything she failed to understand about family. It's not just a valuable piece of property. It's the place where Dad and I built our relationship through years of care and sacrifice. It's the place where I learned that some things are worth fighting for, and some betrayals deserve consequences. Most importantly, it's the place where I learned that home isn't just where you live. It's where you choose to build your life with the people who prove themselves worthy of your trust. Amanda made her choice when she decided to betray the people who loved her most. I made mine when I decided to fight for justice and rebuild my life stronger than before. In the end, we both got exactly what we deserved.